I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today we're taking our very first look at the new Lexus NX. The new NX is one of the most anticipated launches of 2022. Initially, this mid-size luxury SUV was scheduled to arrive in Australia at the end of 2021, but effectively, in order to shore up good supply of this new luxury crossover, the launch has been deferred to the end of January 2022, but it's going to be a real bonanza. The NX is the best-selling Lexus here in Australia. About 1 in 3 new Lexus vehicles sold in this country is an NX. This car competes head-to-head with cars like the Audi Q5, the Mercedes GLC wagon, the BMW X3, and the Volvo XC60. And when I say it competes head-to-head, I really mean that because the luxury mid-size SUV segment here in Australia is incredibly hard fought, with each of these models trading places at the front of the pack at any one time. And the NX is right up there. The first generation was a big success for the company, but there was definitely room for improvement, both in terms of packaging and also in terms of driving dynamics. Well, in today's video, I'm going to take a walk around of this vehicle. We're going to check out the design of the second generation NX. This one next to me in Sonic Quartz is an NX 350h all-wheel drive sports luxury, so very much towards the top of the range, but there is an enormous range coming to Australia for this car. We'll jump inside the interior, which is completely different for a Lexus, totally ditching the previous interior design concept in favor of something all new. We'll have a look at the back seats and the boot space. We'll take a look at the rear of the car, which again is totally distinct in terms of visual design. We'll have a chat about the running costs and what you'll be able to find under the bonnet, and then I'll sum up my first impressions ahead of getting a drive of this car early next year. But before we get started, hit subscribe down below the video and the notification bell. Looking at the second generation NX, it's obvious that Lexus isn't really throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. The first generation car has sold well, partially because of its handsome angular features. Now, the second generation car is toned down a little bit. In particular, it has quite nice flowing lines up the side profile of the car, but here in the front, it's still absolutely a Lexus. We have this big spindle grille. It's really bluff too. It drops down at pretty much 90 degrees, so it has this really aggressive look at the nose cone. This one is a sports luxury, which sits at the top of the range, and it sort of looks like it has a black grille. It's not actually black. It's really dark metallic gray, but I think it presents quite nicely if this sort of design is your thing. This color, Sonic Quartz, but you can get 7 colors across the regular range, plus there are 2 exclusive colors for the F-Sport variants, which include a different white and a cobalt blue. But on the luxury and sports luxury variants, you've got a couple of blacks, you've got a silver, a gray, this Sonic Quartz, you've got a different blue, you've got a Caliente red, so there should be a decent amount of choice for those who want something a little bit more bespoke. We've also got here the Blade Scan triple LED beam headlights on the sports luxury variant and also on the F Sport. Now, they actually cast their LED at a very, very fast spinning blade mirror, which can adapt the beam to be broader or narrower to prevent the eyes of oncoming motorists from being shielded, but also illuminating the sides of the road in the country better. So you can see people standing there randomly, you can see kangaroos, you can see road signs, and the technology really does work on other Lexuses, so that's pretty cool to see here. We do have a little bit of black trim down here around the LED fog lights, but looks pretty good. And then behind those, we have 20-inch wheels on the F Sport and the Sports Luxury, different design of 20s, 18s on the base luxury. But here on the Sports Luxury, it's running 235/50 R20 Bridgestone Alenza tires, so still a decent amount of sidewall despite having pretty big wheels. The F Sport has adaptive variable suspension, but the Sports Luxury just has passive dampers, but a luxury tune of suspension, Lexus tells us. While the front end is more evolutionary than revolutionary, as we start to move down the side of the NX, you can see what I was talking about with how this car has a slightly more organic, curvaceous shape when viewed in profile. Now, it still has these really lovely aero mirrors. Lexus have been using those for ages. and they start off this chrome-lined glass house that's fairly conventional, but the car has fairly broad shoulders now, and proportionally, it looks good. I think it looks good in photos, but I think it also looks really quite nice when you see it in person. Now, it is relatively tall, this car. It's a bit shorter in terms of height than a RAV4, for instance, a vehicle that also shares the GAK chassis that the new NX is based on. Now, on that roof, F-Sport cars and the Sports Luxury are available with a panoramic sunroof. It's worth keeping in mind, though, that the entry-level Luxury has a traditional porthole-style sunroof. So depending on your tastes, whether you want a full glass roof or not, you can be guided by those particular trim choices. Now, as we come a little bit further down, we see these new restyled door handles that are really nicely built into this character line here on the side, but that's not the main point about the door handles. This car has the new Lexus e-latch system. So it's actually an electronic latch in the door. If you reach in, there's actually a button behind which just opens the door without any mechanical pull or mechanical latch. And what that's doing is it's actually looking for cyclists coming up the side of the car, and it will just temporarily delay opening the door very briefly if you're about to knock a cyclist off, which of course is a consideration in cities in this day and age. The back door, this character line splits off into this triangular shape, which is really quite nice, but it also illustrates the length of the car, and it's longer than something like a Toyota RAV4. At 4,660 millimeters long, it's starting to get up there for a mid-size SUV. The NX remains perhaps a half size smaller than some of its competitors, but it really is beginning to close that gap. It's 20 millimeters longer than the previous NX. It's also 20 millimeters wider, which gives it a really nice stance, and it's a little bit taller as well than the previous car. But as we start to approach the rear end, you can see where the Lexus design language has really gone in a different direction from that perspective. Because here around the back, the exterior design is unfamiliar. There hasn't been a Lexus SUV that has looked like this from the rear. The first thing you'll notice is that the Lexus badge is actually spelt out in letters here rather than with an L badge. You still get the traditional Lexus mark out the front of the car, but here it adopts this kind of quite postmodern, almost 1950s kind of lettering that we're starting to see across a whole bunch of cars. Down here, we've got the signifier of the model and whether you've got all-wheel drive or not. So as I mentioned, this is an NX 350h hybrid, all-wheel drive. And we have this really nice piece here in terms of lighting. So we do have an illuminated heck blender LED strip across the back of the NX and quite handsome tail lights as well, almost BMW 3 Series like that kind of blade there, but it all comes together really nicely. And the NX has quite a pert butt, I think you would say. The rear overhang is short, and that's because unlike the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid, which has its hybrid battery behind the rear axle, in the NX, it's under the rear seat. So it lets them keep the overhang of this car nice and compact, so it looks fairly pushed out to the corners. Other details back here, we've got a bit of fake Venturi, but looks kind of cool. Fairly prominent black cladding around the back. You'll notice hidden exhaust outlets, dual on the hybrid actually, and a relatively small rear wiper, which hasn't been hidden away under the rear spoiler, which is a bit of a shame because I think hiding that would have been even greater attention to detail. We do have a power tailgate across the range that beeps just once when you ask it to open up, unlike the Toyota, which beeps the entire way up or down. So there you go. If you spend more money, you're only subjected to one beep. I'll pop in my suitcase there as a prop for the 520 litres of boot space. It's a decent sized boot. It looks bigger than that to my eyes, to be honest. It's probably because it's a little bit shallow, but with the cargo blind removed, as it is in this car, there really is a good amount of space. Nice and square, aluminium finisher across the boot there to protect this sonic quartz paintwork. We also have a little bit of storage under the boot floor here. In terms of a spare, we don't have one in this car at all, not underslung either. So that is something to keep in mind with the NX. But what we have for the first time on an NX is a power folding rear seat, and it is just one touch, really luxurious. You don't have to stand there holding it, they just drop down. But that's only available on the Sports Luxury. In terms of other features, we do have a couple of hooks. We have a 12-volt socket here in the boot, and we have a bit of netting off to the left side so your stuff isn't just rolling around. Then up here, we have buttons. There's that one beep. Buttons to either close the boot or close it and lock the car. And that really completes my exterior walk around of the vehicle. And you can let me know whether you think the design is an improvement or not down below the video in the comments. Well, the exterior design of the new NX is handsome and pleasant. The real appeal is actually when you jump into the front seat here, because the interior design concept of this SUV is completely new, totally unrelated to the first generation NX, and pretty much unrelated to any Lexus currently on sale. You look at every single component in here and you think, wow, I haven't seen that before in a Lexus. And it has to start with what the brand is calling the Tizuna concept, which is the driver centricity in here, where you just don't have to think about where anything is, because clearly UX designers were involved. Rather than having buttons just vomited everywhere around the interior, everything is in its place and everything has a place inside the NX. Now, it is very hard to ignore this big new screen. F Sport and Sports Luxury variants get this beautiful 14-inch display that almost completely fills the bezel of the console here. It's angled very much towards the driver, completely bespoke for right-hand drive compared to left-hand drive, and with a proper conversion is the wrong word because this car's home market is Japan, but with a proper setup for right-hand drive. There isn't anything weird like you get on some German SUVs where, you know, a volume dial might be way over here. Instead, everything lies within reach. That's the entire kind of raison d'etre behind the Tizuna concept. So as your eye falls down here to the center console, you find this really lovely knurled temperature dial here, the power button for the car, the automated parking system, the cameras system, all falling nicely within reach, sweeping down to this really well finished center console with just a delicate little automatic transmission shifter down here and also a drive mode selector. So it no longer has those knobs to the left and right of the cowl, which some people liked, and judging by our comment thread, a lot of people didn't like. It's gone. So you're actually looking at quite a clean dashboard, I think. Looking through this new steering wheel, we still have quite a pleasant digital display, very much hybrid focused with a charge, eco and power graph in front of me here, but still a fixed fuel gauge and also a temperature gauge. But it looks clean, it's not distracting at all, and then quite a nice, what looks like leather padded cowl over the cluster there towards a heads-up display, a really cool heads-up display that is linked via capacitive touch to the functions on the steering wheel. So as you run your finger over the wheel, you can see exactly what you're touching up there on the heads-up display. Really nice. And then there are function keys to change exactly what you're looking at. That all feels really intuitive. Speaking of the new steering wheel, leather finished, quite small, delicate little airbag cover with a bit of stitching around it, and paddle shifters. They're not metal, but they look like metal. Indicators, pretty standard for Lexus, although there is a new audio file behind the indicator. See, we really do go down to the nitty-gritty here on Chasing Cars. So let's talk about this screen. Let's talk about how it actually works, because it's a completely new operating system for Lexus. No more touchpad. There's not even a touchpad for secondary inputs. It's all in the touchscreen. So the system itself is completely new, totally new operating system, and a lot more processing power behind it. This particular car I'm showing you today is pre-production, so not everything works perfectly, but even in this state, you can see there's an absolutely massive improvement in how quickly it renders new sheets of mapping as you just aggressively scroll around. It's right there with you, very much smartphone-esque in that sense. You've got fixed controls here on the right for your navigation, your media, phone, and car controls. And really nicely, the car controls are not just scattered, instead they're all within easy reach, so you can turn off things like lane keep assist very, very easily. We've got fixed climate panels. Some people will like that, some people won't, but you've got one-touch access to the heated and cooled seats here, to the temperature, to the fan, knurled knobs for the temperature, a knurled knob for the volume control, all really nice. Little air vents down here, And up here on the side, we'll see how powerfully they work, but Toyota and Lexus air conditioning is usually very good. Plus, we have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so that takes up almost the entire screen, looks great, and links into the Mark Levinson 17 speaker stereo that is standard on the Sports Luxury and optional as part of an enhancement pack on all drive versions of the F Sport. As with the previous model, entry-level luxury grades have a pretty decent amount of kit for a vehicle in this segment. So we're talking 8-way power adjustment for the front seats, plus 4-way lumbar for the driver, a power adjustable steering column, a power tailgate, and heated front seats as well, although they're not real leather on the luxury. If you want natural leather, you've got to go for an F Sport, which is available with a number of fetching two-tone interior combinations or just black, whereas the Sports Luxury, along with the Luxury, is available with a black interior, rich cream, hazel, which is like a tan, and also dark rose, which is like a really deep Bordeaux red, which ought to look quite nice. And if you go for the Sports Luxury, you also get this lovely Sumi black walnut ornamentation. Not very much of it, it's just up here, but at least where it is, looks really good. While a smartphone charging is available on most grades, and you can just push your phone out of the way, and that reveals a flock-lined secondary storage bin, USB-C and old-style USB, decent-sized cup holders, and one of these cool flock-lined dual opening center console boxes. Plus okay-sized door bins, although they're far from the biggest in the segment. We're sitting under a panoramic roof here in the Sports Luxury, and the headliner is light in this car, it's dark in the F Sport. And in terms of subjective comments, what I would say is it's comfortable, the driving position is quite elevated, the window sill is at a nice height for resting your arm, you've got a secondary soft armrest down here, so you feel quite upright but certainly supported, and I think this seat is going to be comfortable over hundreds of Ks. Soon we'll know. Importantly, the F Sport and the Sports Luxury have cooled seats, really nice feature you get on a lot of Lexus products just to wick away any sweat over summer, and that's important here in Australia, particularly if you're going to go for a black interior like this car. So first impressions up front are that the technology's taken a quantum leap, the quality remains there, the comfort appears to be good. So with that all said and done, let's have a look at the second row. Jumping here into the second row of the Lexus NX, you can see it's nice and spacious. It's a little bit bigger than the first gen car, which was never massive in the back, but with the front seats adjusted into position for a 6-foot driver and front passenger, for myself at 6 foot here in the back, I have no complaints. Headroom, I've got about an inch or a little bit more underneath the finisher for the panoramic sunroof. Legroom, I've got plenty, and toe room is really generous. The seat base itself is inclined just enough to support my legs. It could have gone a little bit further, but my legs aren't floating in the air, and that's the thing that's going to keep you comfortable here in the second row over a longer drive. This fifth seat here in the center is usable. It's not massive, but it's usable. At least the floor is relatively flat, which is cool. In terms of amenities, we've got air vents here, heated rear seats in the Sports Luxury as part of an enhancement pack on this Sports Luxury hybrid all-wheel drive. We've also got a 12-volt socket, and we've got 2 more USB-C ports here in the rear, bringing the total for the car to 4. We've also got map pockets in both seat backs up front. We have a flip-down armrest here with 2 cup holders, and it's got some good heft to it, so you can definitely lean against that. The view out of the side windows is really good, so that's where you're getting some benefit for going for an NX compared to the UX, which is Lexus's smallest SUV, which is really very compact. So there's such a difference between the UX and the NX in terms of size now. You almost think whether they'll put something in between those 2 cars, which I think is very much a possibility. And with the panoramic sunroof that you can get on the F Sport and on the Sports Luxury, optionally, the view up and out is pretty good. Mind you, I'm sitting in what appears to be an igloo-like studio right now, but I'm imagining the view would be very nice. And just before we wrap up in the back here, I think I'll just address the points about whether this is a tarted up Toyota RAV4. They definitely share the GAK platform. They're similar dimensionally, though not the same. The NX is quite a bit longer, it's wider, it's a little bit less tall. But I think from what we've seen so far in this video, not just in terms of proportions, but especially in terms of interior design and technology, there's little that you would associate from a perception level with the Toyota RAV4. We love the RAV4, and especially the RAV4 Hybrid. We ran it as a long-termer for some time at Chasing Cars. There's a lot of compelling stuff about this car, but they just feel very different in a static sense. We'll see whether those differences carry through to driving early next year, but so far you don't get a whiff of fancy Toyota. This is very much its own thing. Once you get your head around the quantum leap improvement in the interior technology in the NX, the next big thing is really choosing a variant and choosing an engine. Now, Lexus have sold almost 3,000 first generation NXs in Australia this year alone, and we're in early to mid-November as I talk to you today. And because they're selling so many, that's a pretty big number here in Australia, it means that Lexus are able to offer a good amount of choice under the bonnet with the new second generation NX. So there's 3 engines confirmed to be coming to Australia, and the strategy is a little different to what the brand has given us on the first gen NX. So the entry-level engine, which is going to be badged the NX 250, that is a 2.5 litre naturally aspirated direct injected petrol 4-cylinder engine, making 152 kilowatts of power and 243 Newton meters of torque. Now, that's quite a big change in direction, because currently the base model NX has a 2-litre turbo that makes 350 Newton meters of torque, which is quite a lot more than the torque you'll get in the new entry-level NX 250. That being said, the front drive NX 250 is only going to be offered in base model NX luxury trim, and from there it's a step to 2 more premium engines. You can choose something with a performance bent or something that is pretty quick but also saves you a fair bit of fuel, and that's a choice between the new 2.4 litre turbo petrol or this one, the 2.5 litre hybrid, which is offered either as a front-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive. First of all, we'll talk about that turbocharged 2.4, which you can only have with all-wheel drive, and you can only have it as an F Sport, meaning it gets performance dampers front and rear, adaptive variable suspension, a body kit, just a warm performance bent. But what's not warm is the engine, which produces 205 kilowatts of power and 430 Newton meters of torque. That is stacks of torque for a 4-cylinder in this segment. What you can't get on the NX is a 6-cylinder or a V8, which some of this car's rivals, like the Mercedes GLC, continue to offer, at least for the current point in time. But the powertrain I have here next to me is the one that most people are going to buy, Lexus thinks. It's the 2.5 litre hybrid. We have seen it elsewhere throughout the Lexus and Toyota universe, including the ES 300H that I reviewed recently. But this is called the NX 350H. Why does it get 50 more in the name? Well, it's more powerful in the NX than it is in the ES or in the Toyota Camry or in the Toyota RAV4. Here, you get 179 kilowatts of combined power. For reference, a RAV4 hybrid all-wheel drive makes 163 kilowatts, so this has a useful amount of additional poke. It's fairly quick, but Lexus says it only uses 5 litres per 100 Ks on the combined cycle, no matter whether you go for the dual motor front-wheel drive or the triple motor all-wheel drive version of this engine. Now, you can get the hybrid on the base luxury, the mid-spec F Sport, or the top-spec Sports Luxury, as I have it here. Choice of front drive or all-wheel drive, so this really is kind of the NX motor for all people. I'm looking forward to driving each of the combinations, but this one is likely to be the one that makes the most sense. Of course, you can let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. So those are my first impressions of the new second generation Lexus NX, seen here in NX 350H Sports Luxury form. The new NX will be launching in Australia in late January 2022, so this will be one of our first drives of the new calendar year. But if you like what you see here today and you want to put your name down, Lexus dealerships are doing pre-orders of this car. The one missing piece of the puzzle is we don't yet have pricing. We're expecting to get it maybe in late December or very early January, so pretty close to the launch of the car. I think it's safe to assume that prices will go up a little bit compared to the outgoing NX, reflecting the extra content that's gone into this car. For me, the proof, as always, is in the driving. In a static sense, the new NX presents really well. It's quite handsome, it's nicely packaged, and the cabin technology and comfort are definitely an improvement over the base of the first generation NX. But it'll be interesting to see how the GAK platform and the range of new engines works with this car out on Australian roads, and that's going to have to wait at least another couple of months. Anyway, I'm keen to turn it over to you. Let me know what you think. Are you an existing NX owner thinking about upgrading to the new car? Are you considering this up against something like an XC60 or a BMW X3? Let me know down below this video in the comments. What do you like the look of? What don't you like the look of? Do you have any questions? We'll do our very best to answer them. While you're there, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.